Okay, so it should be recording now. Okay, perfect. Great. So yeah, again, just to reiterate, for those listening to the recording as well, but this talk will be on the BMAT with some top tips and example questions. And then we're just waiting for our colleague to get back from placement, and hopefully at the end, he will be able to do a Q&A, because neither Maddie nor I actually took the BMAT in the end, although we did do some preparation for it, and we spent a lot of time whilst making this presentation, kind of studying it and things as well. So we're very well prepared to give this talk, but he will be able to answer more directed Q&As, questions and answers at the end, as well as giving his tips, as he scored really highly. So if we just get started, if we start off with a brief summary, I know that you guys probably will know already what the BMAT is, but it's a 2-hour written admissions test which assesses your thinking skills and the ability to apply scientific knowledge and communication skills. It is used by several medical schools in the UK, which are listed here, and the exam this year is on the 18th of October, with results being released on the 25th of November. This is 2 weeks earlier than it is usually hosted, and for the first time in a while, there is only going to be one sitting this year. We realise that this is pretty close to the date now, so although we're going to start with a general overview, we're going to focus on hints and tips and how to improve your timekeeping, as well as how to do well on the essay section, as these tend to be the things which people find most difficult. We'll then conclude with a Q&A from the first year graduate entry medical student who we mentioned before, and he has some up-to-date top tips on how you can excel in the BMAT. If you have any questions at any point, if you just put them in the chat, that you're very welcome to put them into the chat, or you can raise a hand and you can come on and ask it if you want, but I know that that could be quite daunting. And I can see just connecting to the audio now is Ali, who is the medical student who's going to answer questions at the end, which is fantastic. So yeah, that's kind of how this is going to run. So if we just get into some more details about the BMAT now, there are 3 sections to the BMAT. Again, as you've probably all started your revision by now, you'll probably know this, but just an overview. Section 1 tests your thinking skills, which is quite similar to the UCAT, and you're given 60 minutes for this, whereas Section 2 is about scientific knowledge, and you have 30 minutes, and generally your kind of A-level preparations will be quite useful for that as well. And then Section 3 is an essay, for which you have 30 minutes to write. In terms of costs and bursaries, the fee this year is £75, which is quite a lot, and there's an extra £38 for those who apply late. Bursaries are available to eligible candidates, so it's worth checking if you apply for this on the link there. So onto the important stuff. How do you prepare for the BMAT? The key thing is practice. Hopefully you have already started going through questions, as it isn't really an exam to cram for, but if it is, just listen to our advice. And there are loads of YouTube videos and things too, so there's plenty of ways that you can prepare yourself from now. The Cambridge Assessment Admissions Testing website has a bank of questions for each section, and we'd really recommend using these as they're most similar to the actual questions that you're going to see. And again, there are many YouTube videos on how to approach each section. And if you haven't taken one already, it would be useful to take a diagnostic mock so that you can see what needs the most work. And if you still have time, I know that it's difficult on top of school and everything else, you could try to focus on a section each day and then build up to taking full practice exams once you're more confident. So by doing those individual sessions on each topic, you can work out where you need work and where you don't. And then doing practice exams in timed conditions is incredibly useful, as most people would do well in the BMAT if they had all day to do it, but the challenge is doing it in such a small amount of time, and so practicing answering it quickly is the best way to improve. The Kaplan books also have lots of advice in them, and so do plenty of online resources, but understandably these, it's understandable if you don't want to use these, as they can be expensive, and there is a lot of free resources that you can use anyways. So on to Section 1. Section 1 is an aptitude test to test your thinking skills. It's similar to the UCAT verbal and quantitative reasoning, so hopefully you've already had some practice for this. It has 32 questions on problem solving and critical thinking. It used to have data analysis and inference, but these are no longer included, which is good because then you can focus your revision some more. There's no negative marking, so really make sure you answer each question, even if it's a guess or an educated guess. And the same types of questions come up every year, so the key is lots of practice. It's also useful to understand the different techniques to understand the different types of questions so that you can apply these same techniques to the new questions. And like we said earlier, the difficulty in this section is the time conditions. So making sure you practice how to answer the questions quickly will be really beneficial. So yeah. So in terms of tips for mastering section 1, make sure you've done some basic maths revision, such as looking at numbers, numerical operations, quantities, and spatial reasoning. Knowing these following relationships that are written here is really important, as converting between those numbers is something you're assumed to know how to do, and they won't tell you how to. That might seem obvious, but it's really easy when you're stressed to just forget something simple like that. But you do not need to know the relationships for other units of measurement, like inches to feet, for example. So don't let this trip you up and waste time revising it. Critical thinking questions do take practice, but if you start trying to identify assumptions or flaws in the argument to start with, then this can help you eliminate some answers quickly. So for example, if the units in the answer are different to the question, cancel them out ASAP and don't even worry what number it is that precedes it. Read the questions prior to the chunk of text, as you'll end up rereading them anyways, and it can waste time to then reread the text a second time. And you want to get very quick at these questions so that you'll have time in the exam to tackle more difficult questions. So that's in terms of the critical thinking ones. So yeah. And then in terms of problem solving questions in this section, it's the 3 different types of relevant selection, finding procedures, and identifying similarities. Questions can fall into more than one of these categories though, so then you'll have to it doesn't matter how many of these categories it falls into, you just have to be well accustomed to all the different types. Relevant selection questions require you to select the important information out of a larger piece and use this to find the answer. So just getting really good at finding keywords and things like that are helpful. Finding procedures means you'll have to find a particular mathematical or reasoning skill to find the answer. So again, getting used to typical ones that might come up is really helpful. And then identifying similarities requires you to find the relationship or similarities between 2 different presentations of data. So like different charts and tables, and just getting used to those is really important. So we've got a few examples of the different question types here. Would you guys be happy to give it a go and then put your answers into the chat? And sorry, just a message that I've received earlier saying, will we cover section 2 prep? Yep, we will. We'll be going through all the different sections one by one. So if I give you guys a minute to have a go at this, and just give it a go, there's no worries if you get it wrong, and just put the answer in the chat. And this talk is aimed for year 13s, but if you're in a lower year or if you're a graduate entry medic or anyone else, then it could still be useful. So you're welcome no matter what. The BMAT is something that a lot of people have to take for entry to medical school. So yeah, if you're in year 12, absolutely, it should be helpful, but you won't have to take the BMAT until next year. So yeah, if you guys give it a go. Okay, so I've had 2 people answer. Is it D? So I have it written. So if I go through how we worked it out and go from there. So this is, as you can see, there's a lot of information here, making the question seem very confusing. These questions don't actually include any complex calculations, so the skill is picking out the right information. You need to find the solution. And then, so working through this question, for example, all you need to do is find the biggest gap between the readings. So Of course, you could calculate each difference, but that would take too much time. So I would suggest finding the lowest diastolic reading and the highest systolic one. And then here you can see that the lowest is actually on the Thursday evening. There you go. Oh, one second, sorry. Sorry, I have something. Okay, yeah, sorry. So the lowest diastolic reading is on the Thursday evening, and it has a difference of 68. And then the highest on Saturday evening, the highest is on Saturday evening, and that has a difference of 48. So then the correct answer is F, actually. I know that's different to what a lot of people have put, as that makes it 86, which was the pulse when it was the biggest difference. Sorry for the confusion there. I had a typo in what I prepared to explain this. But basically what's really important here is that you're finding the lowest readings and the highest so that you can find the quickest way of working it out. And then I'm going to pass over to Maddie, who's going to run through the next ones.
Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, just to reiterate really that like with lots of questions, you're faced with so much information, and the skill isn't actually that it'll be any hard maths, but it is just picking out how to reach it, and it just in practicing, as you'll see, loads of people will get it wrong at the start. So don't ever be disheartened if you're getting questions wrong, but it's just refining that skill in picking up the information and thinking, you know, you can use different techniques. But here we've got another question, and if anyone would want to read through this and put in the chat what they think it is, I'll then go through sort of how I worked it out. And I'll just give that one more minute. And then okay, I've had a few private messages, and so if it's okay with everyone, I'll just go through my workings for this one. The correct answer for this one is actually C. And in this question, it's not immediately obvious what you should do with the information to arrive at the correct answer. And as you can see at the top, I've written it's a finding procedures question. So it's finding what mathematical procedure you need to use to work this out. And then once you do get to this procedure, the calculations aren't actually too difficult. Difficultly, the incorrect answers correspond to the use of an incorrect procedure, which is frustrating because obviously you can kind of take yourself down the garden path a little bit. But in this question, Thursday's shares are 35% higher than Monday's shares and are 25% higher than Wednesday's shares. And this means that Wednesday's shares are 10% higher than Monday's shares because 35 minus 25 is 10%. That makes sense. So then if Tuesday's shares are 20% higher than Monday's shares, Wednesdays are 10% lower than Tuesdays. And this means that you make a loss of 10% between Tuesday and Wednesday, which means that the correct answer is C, because 10% of 3,000. And if anyone has any questions, just shoot them in the chat, and if not, we'll go on to the next one. But sorry, someone just said, could I explain that again? Yeah, sorry. So basically, so in this question, you're just trying to, I think they've given you, it's really tricky sometimes, I find, with percentages to sort of correspond that. But if you just read the sort of question they've the bit at the start, it says that Thursday shares are 35. So I might just read the whole thing out. So Tuesday's price was 20% higher than Monday's, and Thursday's was 25% higher than Wednesday's. Sorry, I'm actually confusing myself now. Is it all right if we just go on to the next one, and then I'm gonna just we'll just go on to the next question, and I will read through that again. But if you guys read through this and put it in the chat, and I'm just gonna sort myself out for a second. Actually, oh yeah, Lucy, can you go back to the question before? I will just explain it properly this time. Okay, so if you can see that, so on Thursday, he made a profit of £350. If you can see that, it's in the second paragraph. And that means that the shares are now 35% higher than they were on Monday, because 35% of 1,000 is 1,350. So that and what you're trying to do with all this information is you're trying to get the percentages to be the same as the amounts, because the information is in different values. I'm not sure how perfectly I'm explaining this, but you're trying to make it all comparable. So they've given you some information in percentages and some in monetary value. And what you're trying to do is be able to compare it by putting it all into percentages. So the information of 350 means nothing when you're comparing it to other things, which is why you've worked out that Thursday shares are 35% higher than Monday's. And then they're also 25% higher than Wednesday shares, because you've already been given that information in the first paragraph, and then you can compare it, and then you can say that, right, that's a 10% difference, because you can compare percentages. You also have that Tuesday's price was 20% higher than Monday's price, and that Wednesday's was 10% lower, which you've worked out from the second thing, and that means that you can then get to the thing. It's quite hard to explain it in words, which is why I sort of lost my wording there. But the overall thing, yeah, someone said I got you. The overall thing is that if you've got this information, make sure you're getting it to a comparable thing, whether it's decimals, percentages, you just want it to be the same. Sorry, go to the next question. And yeah, this one's an identifying similarities question, which means you're trying to find the relationship between different sets of data. So here you can see there's a graph, and here you can see there's a table of information. And if anyone would want to read through that and put it in the chat, you can private message me what you think it might be. Okay, we've had a few answers. So basically with this kind of question, like I think the best kind of thing to do, because you are against the clock, is go through the sort of process of elimination. So what you're trying to see is which graph corresponds to the table, and that is really hard to just do straight away. And I think the best thing is to think, what can't it be? So if you're looking at the peak of cervical cancer rates, it's highest in the 30 to 34 group. If you can see, it's 19.7. And that means that C and D are automatically discounted, or automatically discounted because that doesn't work there. And then you can say, right, that's not. So trying to find, for example, like streams of data, I think is the best way to go about this. And then you can also see that the difference between the final two values is almost negligible, which means that A can't be right. So if you look at the bottom, it's 12.5 and 12.4, and on A there's a pretty big jump. So even though you can't, the graphs aren't super accurate, you can say, right, that's not going to be right. So if you're going against the clock, then that means that B is the remaining answer and B is the correct answer. And if you were given an hour, you would get this, but I think the best technique for this kind of question is just, you have to kind of make those snap decisions. So yeah, process of elimination. Does anyone have any questions for this one?
And I think one more thing to add to what Maddie was saying about the question before, and then also this one where you get all this information that looks so overwhelming, is that because you do have that pen and paper in the BMAT, a really useful thing to do is make a clear little diagram or something. So this isn't something we can show you on here because obviously it's a PowerPoint presentation, but there are YouTube tutorials about it. And then also if you look at, and then also Ali will be elaborating on it a bit later when he gives his hints and tips. So we'd really recommend writing things down to make it clearer for yourselves. And I'll move on to the next slide now.
So yeah, and then critical thinking. So critical thinking is quite similar to the verbal reasoning section of the UCAT. So it'll be kind of familiar to you guys, and the information in the text will lead you to the answers. So you don't need any additional knowledge. It's actually really important to not let yourself bias that, because sometimes questions kind of lead you a certain way because they think you can sort of make inferences that you shouldn't be making. There are quite a few different ways that this can be testing. So you can try and identify the main conclusion, draw your own conclusion, identify assumptions, assess the impact of additional evidence, detect reasoning errors, matching arguments, basically loads and loads of things. And it's a skill that you can improve by practice, because at first it's like, whoa. And if you learn each type of critical thinking question, you can then apply that same technique. So even though it just listed out quite a long one, there's about 6 or 7 of them, and then you can just keep applying it. So here we've got an example. And if you guys want to read through that and put through what you think it might be. So I can see that someone's put D in the chat, and that's the correct answer. And this question is asking you to make an assumption that's underlying the above argument. So it's not explicitly going to be said in the chat. And if you read the question, you see that there is no mention of the latest study being more accurate, which means that you can't make that assumption. So even though it's using that terminology assumption, if the information is there, you cannot make that leap. It also mentions that the risk of developing cancer is due to both intrinsic and extrinsic causes. Again, it's in that text. And I think the difficulty is just speed reading the text, to be honest, which means that it's not B. And then finally, the final sentence completely contradicts the statement in answer C. So there could be no ways of preventing the human body from making cancer causing mistakes. But actually, in that final sentence, it's saying, it's within your control, essentially. So that means that you can't make that assumption. And then finally, it just means that the correct answer is D. And you can sort of do that by process of elimination, because for the process, for the sake of time, if you find that 3 are definitely not it, I actually wouldn't spend too much time checking the last one's right. if you do have the time, do it. But if you're pushed for time, if you can count out 3, just tick that last box. Does anyone have any questions about that one?
Just a couple of things to add to that from me as well. For critical thinking, it's similar to the UCAT. Obviously, it will depend how much you prepared for that. But some of the techniques used in the UCAT are like finding keywords, and then so if you see like extrinsic there, you can quickly scan the text in a second and see that it says it. And then also things like where it says there can be no ways of preventing, because it's a very like yes or no kind of obvious thing, because it says no ways, it's very extreme. Sometimes things that sound too sure, there's something in the text to like make it less likely, so it's worth checking things like that because it can be a quick way of eliminating that option. Did anyone ask any questions?
No questions.
Okay.
So yeah, section 2, I'll just quickly go through this. So section 2 is multiple choice and there's no calculators, and it is on science content. So I think it's really, really important to revise the syllabus like you would for your GCSEs or A-levels, and it's on the Cambridge admissions testing website. It's got really clear content requirements. So try and plan out when you're going to revise and set out how you're going to cover all those parts on the syllabus. But make sure you don't burn out. You know, you're in year 13, you've got A-levels going on, but you know, follow that syllabus. Schoolwork will be a really big help if you are at school, and utilize that science skills that you're having, and use bite-sized and CGP books for any gaps in your knowledge. Go over equations, and we've put a link here to Medify, which has a good blog page about section 2 of the BMAT. The content's been revised from 2019, so if there are any questions with an asterisk on practice papers, it's knowledge you don't need, and skip them if they seem a bit off topic or difficult. There are 7 of biology, chemistry and physics, and 6 of maths, so it's just all those sort of science-based questions really.
Okay. And then section 3, I'll be talking about a bit. As I know, well, to me, it was definitely what was most daunting when I was thinking of taking the BMAT, as it's about writing. And generally when people want to take medicine, it's not because they want to do an essay subject. So a lot of us are very scared at the idea. I still am, and I'm now in my 5th year. So section 3 is composed of 3 essay questions, and you have 30 minutes to select, plan, and then write that essay. If you are really worried about your writing skills, that Open University has free writing courses. I know that now it's getting really near to the exam, so that kind of might not be your priority. I'd definitely probably focus on like the proper revision now. But don't panic about the writing, as it's about how you develop your ideas, how you plan it, and then communicate them effectively. But if you if you use language decently and you know how to put your point across, you'll be fine. And it is one side of A4, so just make sure that you're good at writing concisely, kind of learn how to fit various things into the same sentence, so like your point and explanation and things. And then timing and technique are crucial, as again, you've not got much time at all. So this is kind of how we propose that you should write your essay for section 3, with your introduction being what is the topic, explain the quote or statement that you've selected, and just give a really brief introduction. It's just to provide it with some structure. It's not particularly going to delve into anything, because it is just to give the thing some structure and kind of let them know where you're going with this essay. But then the main body is kind of the important bit, and you can split it into 2 to 4 paragraphs. And whether or not you're agreeing with or disagreeing with the statement or the question or the quote, you want points for and against the argument, so that you can form a balanced argument and then decide which is the best point. And then each paragraph should start with a sentence signposting the main point and then expand on it. So from what I was saying on that previous slide there, it's about testing your ability to develop ideas. So the point of that in writing your points for and against the argument is showing that, as you will have to in medicine, you can appreciate different views on things, and that you can really genuinely see both sides of things, as that's really important when you're speaking to patients, when you're trying to think about their best management plan, as there's so many different factors that go into it. So it's just really preparing you for that, and then also showing them that you know your stuff, which we'll get a bit more onto in a second. And then the conclusion, so this should summarize the main points of your essay, and you should draw a final judgment on the topic that you've been discussing. So it's really important that you come to a conclusion, and that if you've been weighing up those pros and cons of something, or fights for or against something, that you decide on one of them. And in your conclusion, it's really important, as this is an essay, that there's no new evidence or arguments. It's just a summary and a conclusion to your points. So that's about making sure that you communicate everything effectively finally through the conclusion. And I think what I really struggled on was what question do I decide on? Because you could spend ages wasting time doing that when you only have half an hour to write it. If one really does stand out, then do that one if you're really comfortable with it, if it's some kind of niche area that you happen to know lots about. But otherwise, we would recommend doing the medical ethics type question, because in the medical ethics question, similar things come up every single year. So if you study these concepts that I've put down here and then look at that link, or just type in the medic portal with medical school interview medical ethics or something, then by looking at these concepts of medical ethics, which are really there's not much to them, it's just, well, there would be if you delved into it more, but if you get the basic understanding of the 4 pillars of medical ethics, utilitarianism and deontology, then you've got a really sound basis to answer any medical ethics type question. And they also offer quite good layouts for it. So like with 4 pillars, that kind of gives you 4 paragraphs if that was a way something works. So by doing that question, you know that you could have some facts to back up your answer, but you'll definitely know keywords that demonstrate that you're really dedicated to becoming a doctor, you understand the ethics, and it gives you good ways to back up your points. And read the question. What exactly are they asking you? And does it mean something specific to you yourself if you were to want to put a personal spin on something? But again, if you follow this layout of using medical ethics, it's quite an easy way to answer questions. So I've just received a direct message that says, are we allowed to make up statistics to back up our points? I don't think that would be appropriate in this case. I mean, Ali can definitely answer this again at the end, but I don't think so, because you're not trying to create something that's untrue. You're trying to answer the questions to the best of your ability. So if there was something that you knew loads about and you knew statistics on it, then sure. But actually, I'm not sure, because you would have to reference such statistics in real life, potentially. So I think the best, most sound way of doing it is to use facts or theories like the 4 pillars, so beneficence, do no harm, things like that. And how do I get enough knowledge about both sides of the argument given and write about it like this? So it's not so much about the knowledge and the stats, it's about developing a point, and kind of allowing it to like read fluently so that it's a convincing argument. I think it's really worth going through previous questions, and kind of seeing how they've done it. So I'll explain here with an example, if this helps at all. If not, just feel free to ask more questions. But so when treating an individual patient, a physician must think of the wider society. So you want to explain the reasoning behind this statement, argue that a doctor should only consider the individual that he or she is treating at the time. With respect to medical treatment, to what extent can a patient's interests differ from those of the wider population? So you can see that this isn't the kind of thing where you need to pull in facts and figures, but it's about developing your thoughts and providing a for and against argument. So in terms of extra relevant knowledge, so something you could have heard of in your wider reading, but is by no means essential, is a QALY, and that's a quality adjusted life year. It's worth you guys jotting that down if you don't know what it is, because it is quite useful to know now and at interview. And that's basically something that the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, so kind of like a a body that just makes a lot of important decisions in healthcare, that they use to see whether or not the amount we spend on, for example, a medication is worth it for one quality adjusted life year. So if that patient's suffering loads, but the medication is just about helping them hold on, then it kind of weighs up whether or not the medication is worth the cost. And currently, I believe, unless it's changed since I last looked at this, that's valued at, I think, about £30,000 per year. So that's an interesting way in which you could pull in that fact. But even if you don't know that, you could use the ethics. So two pillars that are kind of at play here with the pillars of medical ethics are justice, which is about fairness and that people get their treatment. So justice for all patients, because then if an individual if he's paying lots for this one patient's treatment, then it will take it away from other people whose might cost less, for example, or their treatment might do more. So it's about considering that justice versus beneficence, because it's about being as kind as you can for that patient. So that's kind of two ways you could develop that and weigh up for and against it. And then utilitarianism and the concept of the greatest good for the greatest number of people, that's another thing that you could bring into this when you're seeing if you should treat the individual patient or the whole society. And then another good topic to look into is another good resource is Good Medical Practice, which outlines how doctors should act and your duty of care to a patient, because everything is supposed to be patient-centered in medicine, and you have to make the care of your patient your first concern. So maybe at that time it is to focus on that patient, but then again, you have to think that there's a wider population of patients who are also your patients. So in considering the individual, the doctor, the patient is treating at the time, it could be about considering the whole population. So yeah, that's just some things to weigh up for and against, but it shows that if you have that basics of ethical knowledge, then you could really smash any question that they throw at you. So I'd really recommend doing the ethics question, unless you're very knowledgeable about something else, or you think that you could think of good fors and against. But again, it's just about planning it quickly in that time that you have, so that you can make your your points of view as concise and as good as possible. Okay, and then if we move on here to how the BMAT is, sorry, I've just got one more question. In your conclusion, do you make a final disagree/agree with the statement? Yes, I would come to a conclusion where you say, therefore, I think this, and you could explain that. You could then say, this is because the reasons that I have listed, or you could give a few of them as examples and say that is the most strong argument, kind of thing. So you just want to tie it all together. So then here I've got a thing on how the BMAT is scored. The BMAT is scored on a scale of 1 to 9, with 9 being the highest. It's not pass or fail. In sections 1 and 2, the questions are worth 1 mark each. So if you are weaker in one of those sections, don't panic. Everything's worth the same there. And then in section 3, you'll get a score for the content of your essay, and this could be A, B, or C. And then this, for the use of English as well. And then the essay is marked by 2 examiners with the 2 scores averaged to prevent things being unfair. We'd say a good BMAT score is 6 or above, with the average score being 5. And then, is there another question there? Do you argue it in the third person or from your own perspective in first person? Oh, thank you for that question. I would say generally, when you're writing an essay, it is best to do it in the third person. I think Ali will be able to confirm whether this is the case for this, but generally, definitely in medical school as well, it is best to offer to write things in the third person. And then, yeah, even when you're writing your conclusion, just kind of using the third person, yeah. On the right hand, I'm so happy to answer more questions, but I'm aware that Ali will be able to answer them better than me in a minute. So I'll put it on to him. But I would really, really appreciate it if you guys could use this barcode to fill in our feedback form. You don't have to fill it in now, you can fill it in at the end, but if you just, and I'll come back to the screen at the very end of the talk, but if you could fill it in for us, your feedback is so important to us, it helps us improve, and also it's quite useful for us in our medical training, so we'd really appreciate it, as showing that we're teaching and that we're trying to improve and things like that is really important. And then hopefully we can improve this talk more for next year as well. So thank you. If you could please take a picture of that, and I will add the link to the chat at the end as well. So if I hand over to Ali now, here are some more resources as well. So if you fill in our feedback form, I will make sure to email out this PowerPoint with the resources as well, and it should be up on our website soon anyways. So Maddie there has just posted the form as well. So yeah, I'll hand over to Ali, and thank you guys so much for listening to us so far. I know it's been quite long and it's your Tuesday evening, but I really hope it's been helpful. And if you ever have any more questions, just send us an email or a DM, because we're here to help you guys. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Maddie and Lucy. I hope everyone took a lot away from that. There were a lot of gems in there, but even to be fair, I didn't think about, which is pretty insane. I know they haven't, you know, it's been a while since anyone's done these admission tests, so really, really good. Can you skip forward a few slides? Got this one. Perfect. Stay there. Just before I start, has everyone had an email about the BMAT sessions coming out? Feel free to throw in the chat. Yes, no, maybe.
Not everyone on this will be Medics&Me students as well.
I see. All right. Well, if you're interested in joining, there is a BMAT intensive course kind of running on Thursday. So if anyone hasn't signed up for that, fill in the form I've just sent into the chat. We're running section 1 and 2 on Thursday, I think based on the responses that come back. And then section 3 is covered by another guy next week on the same day, Thursday, both at 6 p.m. Come along, because I appreciate it's a bit tight for time tonight, and we can kind of break these sections down bit by bit. I'll try and stop here through. I know we're supposed to finish in 10 minutes, so I'll see if I can make it. So section 1, as Lucy alluded to, problem solving and critical skills, and she gave an example on both. And this is kind of a little example of what you might want to be looking at. So a random question here that I've got to do with problem solving. You read out, I guess I can talk you guys through it. It's basically saying you're repainting this room, and they model it as a rectangular box. It's got these dimensions, and in that situation, get it on the paper, because your brain can only hold sort of 7 bits of information at once. If you ever wonder why you can't remember a phone number that's 11 digits, that's why. Get it on the paper. You can kind of see what's going on. You can check in a lot of these problem solving. There's a lot of steps that you have to jump through to get to the final answer. So make it easier for yourself. Jot it down. There's a bit of a trade-off. Don't spend ages doing fancy diagrams. If you can understand it and you get the information from it, you're laughing and you'll get better marks as a result. Lucy's already spoken about this, but practice your calculations. Do a bit of division, learn for it. There's some shortcut methods that you can use that I'll talk about on Thursday. If you have a case where you're, for example, dividing, I don't know, 6 by 9.8, round that 9.8 up to 10, you'd be able to tell me what 6 divided by 10 is a lot easier than 6 divided by 9.8. Use the paper is the example I've covered here, and be sensible. You can see the answers here. How many tins of paint do I need to buy? Well, it ranges from 1 to 17. And actually we find out that it is 1, but there's usually the answers will be tailored towards if you make a certain mistake. So you may come to an answer. I'm not saying if you get the answer, it's going to be the wrong one, but you may come to answers and they'll be on the paper, but they'll be there because they kind of want to, you know, collect the wrong answers, if you know what I mean. So just check the working, use the paper, and be sensible. So yeah, I think that's everything for problem solving. Critical thinking tips. These are the kind of more wordy ones, and there was a really good example that was covered by Maddie about identifying the assumption. These are definitely easier ones to pick to get better at quite quickly. If you have a crack at these, you'll kind of you'll get better at them quite quickly. So the first one is like identifying the main conclusion. This is it's going to literally say identify the main conclusion from this. You're looking at stuff like the tone of the paragraph, what the author's trying to say. If the author's trying to say British politics have reached their boiling point, you're thinking he's not happy with politicians or the way something's being run, stuff like that. You'll have a really good intuition. You're all applying to medicine, probably emotionally intelligent people. You'll have a good idea and a good feel in the text of what idea is trying to be conveyed. Use it and you'll be good. Drawing a conclusion. Can you summarize the whole paragraph, everything that you've just read, and condense it into one line? If you can, that's your answer. But again, we'll talk about more on Thursday. Identifying the assumption. We're talking about, as Maddie really nicely put together, can you make the link between what the text is trying to say and the conclusion? It'll be a hidden, very subtle thing. So for example, if I said, Manchester United has got lots of money, therefore they're going to win the season today, or this year. The assumption there is that having lots of money means that they'll win the season, but it's not explicitly said. So using that kind of logic helps you to get the answers with that one. Can you assess the impact? And I apologize, I'm running through these. We'll comprehensively do it on Thursday. Can you assess the impact of additional evidence? This will be weakening or strengthening the argument. So for example, if there was a paragraph and the conclusion was that smoking is bad for you, you're thinking that's it. And one of the answers is, there's a piece of evidence that suggests that lung cancer is 10 times more likely in smokers. Well, that would probably be a strengthening argument there. You've got evidence to put that conclusion to a higher level. Detecting reasoning errors. This is just finding flaws in the argument. Has, for example, the author generalized one person's viewpoint? So, for example, my child went to childcare. She had a fantastic experience. Therefore, all children should go to childcare. That's one person's viewpoint being generalized into a whole population. And it's one example where they can, of a question style that they can ask there. And the last one is matching arguments, pretty self-explanatory. You're looking for example, driving a car is dangerous, so I wear a seatbelt. Is the same logic as saying riding a bike is a risky activity, so I wear a helmet. It's those kind of things. They're really good if you find that you're struggling with one in particular. So you might be thinking, the assumption one is a tricky one. So Control F, or everyone look at your keyboards, find the Control key or the Command key if you're a Mac user, and the F key. If you download the BMAT past papers for section 1, you can Control F, search for the keyword assumption, or ASSU, and it'll bring it up, and you'll be able to flick through those questions. Bit of focus revision, it's good, and hopefully you'll knock them out of the park. So there's my section 1. Section 2 is, this has already been covered by Lucy here. Test your knowledge on the specification. The only thing I would say is make sure your physics knowledge is good, because I remember coming to a question in my BMAT and thinking, God, I wish I'd done just a few more physics questions there, because it was an annoying one, and one that if I knew the formula better, I would have been able to get it. Don't do that. And also, it's worth a quarter of the marks as well. It's worth considering. I know everyone here is probably doing maths and chemistry. Physics is the one that kind of falls to the wayside in favor of, I don't know, maths or some other healthcare related subject. So yeah. The section 3. This is really where you can definitely get potentially come unstuck if you haven't planned enough at the start. So my first advice is make a plan. I know it sounds crazy and you've only got 30 minutes, and please practice before you do this. Make a plan, have a good look, likely go for the medical ethics one, because I'm hoping you'll be practiced and versed by this point. Have a plan, outline your points, go for and against. So as I say, balance your argument there. And make sure that when you're concluding, you don't introduce any new points. It's very easy if you haven't planned, for example, to kind of have a brainwave and think, oh, I'll throw that in there. Try not to do that. If you have a plan, you've got your intro, your main body where you develop all your points. Conclusion is just how far do you agree with the statement? You can just go as much or as little as you like, so long as you back up your conclusion with points you've made in the body of the text, you'll be good. Having a look at examples as well is really interesting. You can see how the examiners look at the essays, and this is the document that I've linked just here. They give the mark, the grammar as well is pretty important, and they'll give reasons to why they give the mark. It's scored out of 3 and out of 5. So out of 5 and 5. So your content is 5, your grammar is 5. Make sure you're in that 75% that gets the 5 in the grammar. It's not hard to get, and I'm sure everyone here is really good in English ability. Make sure that you plan, and you'll be able to kind of not be kind of jammy in sentences here and there, and it can throw off the flow and potentially your grammar and style, you know. So again, as I say, Thursday is the first session. Get to that form, fill it in, put your email in, and we can go further into all of this. But yeah, hopefully that's time for me. And I hope that you've had a good presentation tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening, everyone. Someone just said, can you copy that link into the chat? Yeah, please, if you don't mind doing that, Ali, that would be fantastic. And I'll just copy and paste the document again into the chat and bring us back to the slide with the barcode on, the QR code. If you guys could fill that out again, it's super useful for us, so please do. Thank you. And if you have any more questions, pop them in the chat now, or feel free to ask us on any DM or anything. I hope that you guys found it useful, and thank you for listening. And are there 3 separate scores for the BMAT, or are your scores from section 1 and 2 averaged? Ali, do you want to give that one an answer?
Sorry, just I finished copy pasting. Yeah, so you are, it depends on what medical school. It's not average. So section 1 is out of 9, section 2 is out of 9, and section 3, as I was saying, is 5 and 5. So you're looking for a total of 28. No one gets 28. It's kind of your distribution of scores kind of looks like a bell curve. And most people, the majority of people, will get either 3 or 3.5 for the writing. So you're looking at, I think I was looking at some scores, you're looking at maybe needing a 5 or so, a 5 in section 1 and 2, and then a 3.58 would be good to get most of them. But yeah, why do you get 3.5 is because it's marked by examiners, as you've got on that slide there. Yeah, I also think that they might have meant the link to your talk, your Thursday thing. I'm not 100% sure. But if you, I'm not 100% sure if it is just for Medics&Me partner schools, but if I will find out with Megan, our founder, and check with Ali and the team what you guys want to do with it. But I'm sure that I could, if you guys put on your feedback form that you'd like to attend, we have your emails and we can contact you regarding that to see if you can get added to it. So yeah. But yeah, thanks again, guys. It's been good to have you guys. Thank you for answering all the questions and things. It makes it a lot easier to host the talk when you guys put in the answers and things, so we can see what people are thinking, and so that we know that you are doing it, because it is useful to go through them. So yeah, thank you. And if you have any questions, just send us a message. So I'll end the talk now. Bye.